Hello, and welcome to another Campfire Session presented by Encamp. I'm your host, Brandon Barlow, along with Encamp CEO, Luke Jacobs. Today, we'll be discussing digital transformation with ANVL CEO, Robin Fleming. Robin, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for inviting me onto the show.
Yes, absolutely. So we're very excited to be speaking with you today. So can you please give our guest a little bit of background information on yourself?
Sure. I am a longtime technologist. I've been in technology for over uh, 30 years. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ANVL. We've been around for a couple of years now, focused on frontline worker safety and helping with that digital transformation effort. You might notice a little bit of a Southern accent. I actually hail from Arkansas, spent most of my life in Texas, and as an Indiana-based company, I got here as fast as I could.
Absolutely. So you, like you said, you've got 30 years of experience. You got a really interesting story how you got here. So I know you've been working with brands like Match.com, Teradata, Angie's List. So how did you get into the environmental health and safety space?
Well, so as I looked kind of to the next step after Angie's List was acquired, and most of the leadership team moved on to other things. I ended up coming in contact with High Alpha, and High Alpha had been working with Cummins as part of their innovation accelerator on potential ideas to go to market with. And Cummins is world-class leader when it comes to workforce safety. They've won a Campbell Institute award. They really genuinely care about their people and, really moving safety to that next level of sophistication. Um, and they had spent quite a bit of time looking for kind of those next gen tools that they could put in the hands of the frontline worker, and they weren't finding them. So they partnered up with High Alpha to really kind of vet the idea through a series of meetings in High Alpha's Sprint Week, where ideas are vetted and you determine whether or not you build a company. And so, as they were looking for someone to run with that idea, be a co-founder and lead the company, that's where High Alpha connected with me. Um, a little bit more on that backstory. So, if you go look at my LinkedIn profile, you look at my resume, you will not find anything about environmental health and safety on there. I did have a great opportunity while I was still in college to work for International Paper Company, and I had ultimately an internship there to implement an inventory control system. So I wore steel-toed shoes, hard hat, safety glasses, filled out my safety paperwork every day, and went down into the plant to help implement the software. That really got me hooked on software and technology. But I was, training people how to use the software that had suffered severe injuries. I know lots of people that were hurt, and I know people who were actually even killed as a result of working, in that environment. Things are better now. Lots of great technology has been put in place. But the epiphany for me was for frontline workers, they're still using predominantly paper forms and processes versus leveraging smart digital tech.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of really ties in to the Encamp story as well, because Luke, as you can, kind of further expand on this, we saw where, hey, while you guys are using paper, most of our communities in the environmental side is using spreadsheets or even paper as well. So,
Yeah.
Luke, can you kind of give us a story of kind of how Encamp created and how we got here?
Yeah, definitely. So I have background as an environmental consultant, did environmental research before that. And then, like you mentioned, Brandon, really just in the consulting space, you're primarily working with, kind of a combination of the frontline workers, but then specifically the compliance professionals, the industrial hygienists, the, environmental scientists. And a lot of that work was actually being done and still being done on clipboards, spreadsheets, paper forms, and then really one of the kind of key components of really what we are doing at NCAMP, specifically with digital transformation, is we're really interested in once you actually have your data, how do you actually get that to the government, be it at a federal, state, or even county level, in the formats that they actually require with the information that they need so that you're actually in compliance as an organization. So, it's interesting having you on, Robin, because I'd love to hear more about it from you as well. But from what I understand, ANVL is it's frontline worker specific and really is uh, it's real time. You want to understand what's happening or maybe even predict what might be an unsafe condition or an incident before it even happens, which is a little different than Encamp. We're not completely, but primarily interested in post-fact data collection to really automate out these manual processes of even once you've collected your information, you're not in compliance until you actually get it to the regulators in the way that they want the information.
Yeah, that's super important.
So Robin, kind of back to ANVL, can you give us just a brief description of, kind of what you provide for the frontline workers and how that works?
Yeah. So for ANVL, the idea would be, with if you kind of go across any vertical, frontline workers, and these are truly the frontline workers that are on the manufacturing floor, climbing the electrical pole to make sure we have electricity, down in the bottom of a boat, fixing an engine, working on a construction site. Those frontline workers and then the supervisors that are responsible for them, that are often out in the field with them or on a shop floor. The whole idea is let's deliver a smart solution that's complementary to a big EHS solution. So like you talked about kind of that being able to manage data in a smart way and being able to submit data and manage that. That's very important for frontline workers as well. And being able to assess that data. The thing that we do that's different is we're one application that can take, a hazard assessment or a work permit or an equipment inspection or a supervisor job safety observation and build that into a smart workflow so that we can deliver an in-the-moment experience for that frontline worker. So you mentioned real time, and that is what we're all about, is how do we collect information and data in real time so that you can act on it and do something about it. It's still important to have that historical data and look at trends, and that's part of what we do as well. But our overarching goal as a company with regard to safety is before the death, before the injury, before the near miss, we're able to determine that something's not right. And we want to be able to ultimately kind of tap that worker on the shoulder and say, hang on, stop, or notify their manager on their behalf. So that's kind of in a nutshell, the kind of the core, foundation for ANVL.
Gotcha. So as far as ANVL is concerned, you guys are, one of the things that stood out to me about ANVL is your mobile capability. Especially as a frontline worker, everyone has their phone somewhere near them. If it's not on their pocket, if they can't pull it out right there on the, they can walk 20 feet away and do it. So how important is that to you? How's the mobile adoption been?
That's really critical for us. And we're seeing, and you can kind of look at the trends, smartphone adoption, tablet adoption is growing across every industry. We're not quite there yet with mobile, but there's over 96% of the younger workforce. They were born with a smartphone in their hands. So they walk in and you hand them paper processes or even spreadsheets. They're like, isn't there an app? And then older workers, the kind of the numbers in the U.S. are showing that there's at least 80% of the older workforce that has a smartphone, and they may not be using it for work, but they would like to, versus doing something else that's a little bit more outdated and crude and doesn't leverage. I think the challenge companies have is determining really how do they control the use of those mobile devices so that it doesn't create a safety problem. And the good news there is there's been fantastic advances in mobility management solutions. So you can lock those devices down. They can only access certain things while they're at work. So there's great solutions to enable them with mobile, but keep them safe while they're using devices.
Yeah, you touched on a topic that Luke and I sometimes have conversations about, kind of that older worker. Have you got any pushback, or how have you guys kind of approaching this to make it open for everyone?
Yeah, so our workforce is multi-generational, and it's everything from that younger worker that's had that smartphone forever to the older worker who maybe still has a flip phone and isn't really enamored with new technology
Mm-hmm.
on the workforce. We've built the product to be we purpose built it for frontline workers, and we purpose built it with frontline workers. So before we even build the product, we really try to hone in on a super simple to use design that would be engaging, that would not really require training. So on average, it takes about 20 minutes if you know anything about mobile technology, maybe 40 if you don't. And so it's ease of adoption was really our goal, ease of engagement, and we average over 95% frontline worker engagement. But we have had scenarios where we're in, union shops where they're not crazy about you bringing new tech in, but once they start using it and realize that the solution gives them a voice, they can escalate issues.
Mm-hmm.
They can have more engagement with managers and leaders, and that's the thing that makes the difference in terms of engagement and adoption.
You guys have the ability to actually you can have a conversation right there in app as well.
So we have the ability today for workers to escalate
Mm-hmm.
issues, so they can kind of raise and escalate a flag or issue. We do real-time alerts and notifications, and some of the future functionality that we have will be real-time in-app messaging. That's on our roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the things. I think, Luke, it's one of the things we're working on as well. We have we have the ability to have that conversation in app that also pushes you to an email as well. We understand not everyone is going to be in Encamp every day, but one thing we can do is push you to it from the email to back to the app as well. So that's one of the things we're working on. So let's kind of open this up a bit and kind of open it up to other companies. And so, how are other companies, specifically EHS business sectors, using technology to achieve compliance? I kind of want to open it up to both of you.
Well, I'm happy to go first. I think, and this is kind of core to how we position ourselves. We believe that kind of the traditional EHS suites for a lot of the safety aspects and even the health aspect are super important. And we're not trying to compete head to head with those. Those are very deep suites that have really great functionality and help you from everything from specifications around safety to kind of your safety protocols that you would roll out to incident tracking. We've kind of taken a view that we're complementary to any of those solutions because most of those haven't really been architected for a frontline worker, and they're not mobile first. So they're not taking advantage of things necessarily like voice to text, which our workers find very valuable in the moment, so that they don't have to take off gloves and type and all those sorts of things. So I think we view they're very important, but complementary for us in lots of ways to coexist and partner together potentially.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, Robin, and I'll just weigh in. From what we're seeing as well, I would say, some really good news, in this space is that technology adoption is increasing, but a pretty important caveat is that it's starting from a relatively low percentage. I would say EHS is probably behind on just digital adoption in general and relatively underserved by the market. But it is interesting because we do also run into and work with these larger kind of full service suites with your safety, maybe industrial hygiene, your environmental, all rolled up in one. And I think that using that, they have a lot of success with those programs, especially if they put in the time to actually make sure that it's implemented correctly. I think for a lot of systems, if you underestimate setting it up and kind of the quality of the data that's going into the system, you might have a worse result and kind of miss your expectation.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we're really focusing on, I think specifically at Encamp, is that digital transformation is happening not only in the regulated industries in these companies that need to comply with regulations or maintain their safety, audit logs, incident reports. It's actually also coming from the government and from the regulators. So for a lot of our customers, and just the market in a whole, I would say, businesses are trying to find tools that not only help them, optimize their internal processes, but then the government is introducing, new web portals, new systems for reporting. You know, the regulations themselves might be getting updated. So companies are trying to figure out how to, really manage the government's changing use of technology as well. And I think that's leading to, some friction actually, especially with, an aging workforce. A lot of the governmental systems aren't really designed, like it's been really with the frontline worker, even in many ways, the end user in mind. And I think that just makes it extremely complicated for companies not only to have their own systems work, but then they have to be, constantly learning the government's new systems as well. Which actually I'd love to kind of tee you up, Robin, because we've talked about this before. Digital transformation is kind of this overused buzzword, and I'm really interested with how you approach it at ANVL, where you're actually looking to transform your culture in some pretty real ways, in addition to adding the technology. But the technology itself isn't, a magic bullet. It's how you actually get the buy-in from your stakeholders, get them engaged. But I'd love just for you to kind of give your 2 cents on that. I know you have all sorts of, leading thoughts on really safety culture transformation using technology.
Yeah, no, all of those are really good. That's a good tee up and really good points. And I think, the challenge that I think companies face, kind of back just first to the bigger suites. In some cases, they're like big ERP suites. And again, you get what you invest, but in some cases, point solutions can make a better option because they're highly tailored toward a business need, and then integratable, and can be complementary. On the digital transformation front, it is a buzzword that gets, I think, way overused, but it's one that I really like. And I've seen this in my past lives with manufacturing execution systems and supply chain management. And it is truly about reimagining business processes so you get great value of it. You save time, you save money, you get worker engagement. It's around all of those outcomes. And anyone can take, an Excel spreadsheet or a paper form and create a digital replica of that. That could be a great step if you don't have things that are highly repeatable, or you're just okay status quo. I think most companies are not okay status quo, and certainly things like COVID, you can't be okay with status quo anymore. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But from our viewpoint, digital transformation it gives you an opportunity without needing to necessarily imagine an entirely new business process, to take a little piece at a time and drive some improvement. And I think companies are becoming more open to testing and iterating and learning, which is so important with digital transformation. Otherwise, you're just going to create maybe a digital replica that has a marginal increase of improvement over what you did before. It doesn't necessarily save you time. It doesn't necessarily save you money. You don't unlock data. You don't have really kind of the improvement that you could have if you thought about and leverage technology that helps you unlock things more.
Yeah. So as we start looking into this, I was kind of thinking this kind of on the fly here, but we both kind of take the approach as far as Encamp and ANVL of we are kind of taking pride in how fast we can implement, you to a new system. How important is that to the both of you and in your businesses?
Okay, Luke, your turn to go first.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So I would say, as a rule of thumb, I think most people don't love using or having to learn how to use new software. We're all in the tech space, so we're maybe a little bit, outside the average in terms of, I'll download a new app just to, actually see how good their onboarding flow is. For instance, it's a professional curiosity. But I would say for a lot of our end users, it's absolutely critical, and it really comes into, your data out is only as good as your data in any system. And if you are building a system in the EHS space, you need people to be putting that data in. It is not, like a cloud monitoring solution where it's like get all your endpoints set up and it's just like billions of data points are just starting to run through your system. You actually need people to be out there, making counts of, materials, checking inventories, doing walkthroughs, looking at actual pieces of equipment, doing lockout, tag out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't make the software easy for them to do, I think it is actually possible to make a software tool that is harder to use than your paper form on a clipboard. And if you're trying to convince these workers that actually your tool is an improvement, if it's going to take them 9 months and a bunch of training to even understand like what was the point of this solution, you're going to have a lot worse, success really with the key performance indicators of even getting the software. So that's something we, from a product end, we think about a lot. A concept that we think about a lot is time to value. So when a customer starts using the app, even from typing in their email to create an account, how many minutes does it take them before we've been able to provide them some value that they didn't have before that? We want that to be, 5 minutes. We want it to be as quick as possible. And then in addition to that, I think it's, really important to scale out your kind of your process for actually doing customer success, continual training, helping people connect the dots with their programs. Because again, it's you almost have to take a humble viewpoint, I think, as a person in tech selling into a vertical that is very much its own field, its own craft. There's expertise there. So I know from our perspective, it's easy to say, hey, we can digitally transform your toxic release inventory reporting until you meet someone who actually knows what that is. And they might say like, how? This seems like it's going to still take a ton of time and I'll have to go collect all this data and put it together and run all my calculations. And that's actually true, which is one of the things where we really focus on, again, the point solution, trying to make sure that what we do it the best and we make it as fast as possible for the user to understand how they got that value. And then there are a lot of things that we just know we won't do. Even safety, it's actually something we do. We talk to a lot of customers who really would love an all-in-one solution that also only takes like a week to set up, which right now doesn't really exist.
Right.
Robin, you're right on the money. I'd say a lot of the large kind of environmental management suites, the EHSQ suites, they're a lot like an ERP. It's like setting up your SAP or maybe even your Salesforce instance. It's going to be, like a pretty integral part of your business, but you're fooling yourself if you think that's not going to be a year plus to actually get it set up. As anyone, even, as we can say, as anyone who's used Salesforce would know, but interestingly enough, I don't think any of our customers use Salesforce, for instance, at least not in the EHS teams. Maybe they're like support teams or something use it. But yeah, I don't know, humility and just making sure that you're trying to really understand the problem and make it fast for people to get the value. Because I think you are asking them to take a leap of faith on trying something new,
Yeah, and I'll add just a little bit to that. I think for us, violently agree. Time to value is critical, and so we've built the product to be process agnostic, as I mentioned, and we've got templates to get customers started. We can tailor those templates, and if you hand us something today, we can get you up and running in 24 hours. The difference with what we're doing is it's distributed. So it's not, the buyer is not the primary user. So it is still, rolling out to frontline workers. But that's why we focused very heavily on ease of use and making sure that we could roll it out quickly. And what we see with customers is most of the questions come from the workers on what's the process. I didn't really pay attention to it before when I filled it out on paper, but now that it's electronic, which helps drive engagement and compliance, I really want to know what this question means, or I really want to know how to answer this. And that's great because it drives engagement from the front line, and that can drive changes in the business process itself, which is what you want. So we've been in situations where frontline workers were like, all right, you've been asking that question for 10 years. I've never understood it. It really means this. And that's drove process changes that have benefited the whole company. So those are the stories we like. So we're definitely aligned on being able to move fast to add value and show that as quickly as we can to customers.
Perfect.
Definitely.
So it kind of leads into this next question as more organizations are kind of moving towards this, let's say, cost-effective based technology. What are some of the advantages? And then I want to also follow that up as, so what are some of the risks?
Mhm. I could take a shot at that one first. I think, you really have to be open to trying things. When you think about, I think individuals in this space are used to buying big suites, or big suites with lots of small applications that take care of lots of different things. So you got to buy a lot and implement a lot. Um, and then integrate, or maybe you customize it, and then you got to deal with the customization life cycle for kind of those big suites. The advantages could be, you could have a broad suite that takes care of a lot, but kind of going back to the previous point, time to value, it can take a long time, and then by the time you get something implemented, you don't want that to take months to show that people engage or they get value or there's the data out of that is fantastic. You want to be able to get to that quicker and then iterate on it and have tools that are flexible enough to do that versus kind of being locked into, well, I bought this gigantic suite and now I must use this tool. And by the time you get to implement it, you may not be what you want. So I think there's lots of pros and cons on, kind of the broad suites, versus point solutions. And for every person you talk to, they will have very black and white examples of things that have happened good and bad. But my role in being a buyer at previous companies was best of breed. It made more sense. Best of breed, integratable, best of breed with data and reporting flexibility. That means a lot, and gives you a lot of flexibility, especially in the cutting edge areas where you really want to test things out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll build on that. I would say one of probably the biggest advantages that I actually think there's some education happening in the space right now is actually what you get with software as a service and what are the advantages of a continually deployed cloud-based solution. So I think a big thing is just like you're always on the latest version of the software. So that's a big advantage that if you're especially dealing with continual compliance, our customers compliance never really stops. It's an ongoing rolling process. You don't necessarily want to have to buy like the next disk or the next package, where all the cool improvements come out because, regulations could change any month. So I think having really that continual kind of deploy is an advantage, and building on that, I actually think a big thing that we do for our customers, at least in that SaaS is an opportunity, is you're giving them a little bit more support from basically an external IT department. So, for really a lot of our customers who are larger orgs, their IT team is going to be helping everyone, right? So it's not the specific EHS team. So, questions on how to use a tool, with a cloud-based tool where you have an actual support team, you can really just call us and get your improvements, get your fixes. We've helped people, get us logged in their firewalls so that they can log in. Just different things where, we are actually often more responsive than an internal IT team, and so there's some support that you can get from that as well with a really like a SaaS-based vendor. All that being said, because you did ask, Brandon, what are some of the risks? I think the biggest risk is just, again, like not understanding that the system is not a magical fix in any way. Technology, it can't read your mind. It's not going to be on your facility floor understanding everything that's happening. You really need the buy-in from your stakeholders. You need people who are going to be committed to maintaining the tool, to learning more about how it works. So I would say, kind of probably the biggest risk is just anytime you're making a change, if you underestimate how much kind of investment you need to put into that change, you might end up changing off of a process that, while maybe being antiquated, was working onto a new process that, might be modern, but doesn't work if you don't have anyone using it, or, you just don't know how to use it. There are people who really, I think are and this again, I think comes down to maybe some of the messaging from as to tech CEOs being very cognizant about making the promises of what digital transformation can actually do for businesses while helping people understand how to actually get to that promised land, so to speak, being that trusted advisor, especially in this space where we are selling to people who are, not SaaS experts. We might be the first software tool that they've ever bought tailored to them. We have people who are like, is this software or is it a service? And it's like, well, it's a class of software called software as a service, but this is like a new novel concept, to this space, which I think presents so many opportunities for improvements and really even just kind of a quality of life enhancements for the workers in the field. But then, if you don't treat it like it's going to actually be, a new system you need to invest in, you'll get out, a lot less than if you kind of commit and really make sure that you're, working to get those end goals that you have in mind.
Yeah, and I would just build on that just briefly. I think it's hard for me to imagine companies that have not quite embraced cloud technology, and certainly the bigger companies, they're using cloud technology for marketing and back office and supply chain and lots of other systems. I do see, and we do see that from an EHS perspective, that there's definitely trends toward cloud-based, but there's also kind of the on-prem solutions that might still exist, or just the expectation of having things on-prem. I don't run into a lot of those conversations today, not at least on the safety side. But I certainly think your points are spot on around the risk, and there is no magical solution that solves everything. The benefits of cloud technology and SaaS companies, if we are agile, we can move fast. We can, and we both have, we provide value-added services that get our customers up and running, and we do white glove. We know they don't want to learn another software tool to implement something for our frontline workers, so we take care of it, right? We'll even do change management. So I think the ability to leverage SaaS solutions has far more benefits than negatives. And I think it's no longer a trend. I just kind of view that there are some spots in the EHS realm where it's slower moving to adopt that software. I think that the risk is no different that if you buy and implement anything, that if you don't really have a plan to engage and you're not really focused on what really outcome you want, then you may view that you're not getting value out of it. So thinking about what you want out of it at the beginning is super important, no matter what kind of technology that you're implementing.
Definitely. It's actually, as you said that made me think I think a risk that you can mitigate actually by getting cloud-based technology, mobile app technology, anything kind of in this suite or class of tools, is actually the talent wars. You want to win them, right? So we've got the aging workforce, and there are a lot of young, talented people who, we talk to EHS directors who their primary concern is business continuity planning. They're like, all of the people who know how to do this on paper are about to retire. Yeah. All of my people who have master's degrees and are really smart in their 30s don't want to or understand all these paper processes. We've got dot printers. When I came in as a consultant, Brandon, we had an interesting mix of kind of like our production room was very much, like physical, printed assets, bind the books, put it in the filing cabinet. And I think that's something where, you can probably make pretty confident that the software is only, getting more and more ubiquitous in this space. And if you're behind on investing in it, I think there's a real risk to, just lose good workers who want to work for your company, but, might have friends who are at other companies who are like, hey, I use this tool and it actually makes my life way better. And even as you said, Robin, I think it's really an interesting case where even these older workers who might not want to adopt a new tool, a lot of them do have smartphones, and they do expect being able to just fire up an app and, check on ESPN or something, and they're good with that.
Right.
And then I think there's a bit of a, not even a disconnect as much as there's an opportunity to sort of show how some of these consumer technologies actually that a lot of people like using as an individual, you can kind of have that consumerization of, the enterprise software tools, if you actually make them good for a user to use, and kind of design it with that user in
Yeah.
mind.
I would add too, I think in cases where, the risks are really great for that frontline worker to use a mobile device, and maybe you don't want to put those devices, or you've got conditions where you don't need kind of tech in place.
I think a factory floor kind of person isn't going to have a cell phone out. Yep.
They may or they may, they could or they could not, but the alternative would be, kiosk mode. So still give them smart tech, get them engaged, give them the information they need, whether that's looking something up related to work, or whether that is reporting the latest safety incident, or even if it's quality, like this latest defect. That's just there's a lot of focus I think we find around PPE, which is absolutely needed. There's the hierarchy controls, and you absolutely want to put those in place. And then there's lots of interest in different types of smart wearables, which those are interesting as well. A lot in pilot mode. Some have very valuable use. But I think the thing that I kind of come back to, and why we're doing what we do, is one of the easiest, fastest ways to get user engagement and adoption is to leverage the devices that they are most familiar with. And no doubt they're texting every day, they're on Facebook, they're checking, sports scores, just staying connected. And we feel like it's a path of least resistance to drive some of the change that might be really overdue.
Yeah, you guys both have mentioned something throughout this conversation as far as like buy-in at the top. So I'm going to throw an objection at both of you. So something we've heard before. So I'm an EHS director, and as Luke said, when we were consulting, we were still saving everything on paper. So what if the EHS director is kind of worried about this transformation? What if my data gets lost? How do you guys face those objections?
Well, I mean, it's just a non-issue these days. If anyone is worried about data loss with SaaS or cloud technology, there's just no reason to worry about that anymore. That's kind of a I don't know, a 15-year ago question, or maybe even an issue if you had on-prem solutions and your data center went down, or your data provider didn't have storage that was backed up. With cloud technology being so commoditized and so sophisticated, we leverage technology where we don't run on physical servers. So it is maximum effectivity, it max scale. There's all kinds of things you can do with technology now that you couldn't before. So it's not an issue. It's certainly something you want to talk to a software provider about, understand what data retention policies are in place. You want to ask those questions and do appropriate due diligence. But for cloud technology, it's not an issue anymore.
That's a great answer.
No, I agree. Well, and I think, again, this ties into the kind of education in these actual kind of, verticals within large organizations where, Robin, you're completely right. Marketing, HR, IT, they're all running cloud deployed, multi-tenant, systems everywhere. And I think for the EHS people, safety or environmental, a lot of it is actually just some education to help them feel comfortable. And I've talked to people, put it in their language. If they're doing disaster planning and they're worried about their data, just say what's your plan for your server in your back office if there's a flood? They're like, yeah, well, we've got, berms and, we've got displacement and secondary containment areas. And it's like, what's better than that? AWS shards your data everywhere. And it is, it would be impossible for it to go down. Really actually leaning on, same with security. It's like, there are encryption packages out there that are great, but people aren't aware that those are, I think you're right, Robin, kind of that 15 years behind. They're probably thinking of articles they've read in the early 2000s, and they're worried about this. So there's some amount of just helping them understand. I do think there is also, Brandon, to really dig in though, in your original question, if you've got a bunch of paper records, I think actually, digitizing your historical data, that's a completely different question where there's probably just a lot of legwork. And then, it sounds like Robin and the ANVL team does this as well. Service providers will work with you to help you get your data into a system 9 times out of 10. So I think, again, it takes some planning. You need to know what your kind of end goals are, but I would say that it's actually probably less risky if you're actually worried about, keeping your data, secure and available 24/7 if you actually move towards a cloud deployed system rather than, an on-premise system or, especially your own servers that you're maintaining in like a server bank somewhere. That's it's just increased liability actually.
Yeah, I know what we see with our customers and prospects is that there is definitely a lot of paper.
Mhm.
What we've found though is the common theme is that it's maybe not valuable data
Mhm.
because from a safety perspective, some of these, they're not black and white rules that you must follow. They're best practices for a company and business guidelines. And in some cases, it can be regulated standards around
Mhm.
safety practices. But if a frontline worker filled it out, even sometimes managers or leaders, they pencil whip it. So the value of the data on paper in some cases is questionable.
Mhm.
It's almost better to start from here. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if someone wanted us to do that, we would certainly be open to try to figure that out. We also see companies who have a stack of paper and then they turn over to someone who plays an administrative role to enter it into a database or maybe an Excel spreadsheet. And kind of to your point, where those systems live is question mark. Are those backed up and retained and resilient?
Mhm.
And then once the data goes in, can you do anything with it, or is it just another version of paper? So I
Mhm.
think we've
Mhm.
seen kind of all of the above, and it varies different depending on kind of the size of the company and certainly level of sophistication.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Definitely.
I can tell you two have both done your fair share of selling, because those are two great answers. So if I'm an EHS director, and like both of you had mentioned, and maybe I've never had something designed specifically for me. I'm not sure how to buy software. I'm looking for something to help me out. Like, where do I start?
Um, I'll take it first if that's okay. I think it
Yeah, go for it.
starts with, what is the prioritized list of problems you want to solve? If you try to approach it with, I need to solve everything I've ever dreamt of, it's going to be very hard for you to find a solution that can tick all those boxes off in the way that you want it.
Hmm.
So I think it needs to be truly a, a prioritization of what are the outcomes you're trying to drive? What are my biggest problems? How am I going to be able to quickly prove a value prop? What's going to get me there fastest? So it's almost like, in some cases, it's a formula for if I did this, then I get this much result from this. Whether that is reducing paper and I got an increase in productivity, I got cost savings because I now don't need this army of people to go manually enter data. It's the data visibility that allows me to drive improvements and change that I wouldn't ever otherwise known. So I think it's at least having a strategy, but recognizing that if we try to be extraordinarily flexible with what we can do with our solution.
Mhm.
Different types of processes, right? We can implement those, and we're kind of one stop shop. But that's not to say we do everything everyone would want.
Yes.
We're open to be flexible and to try to iterate and to tailor where possible. And I think that's probably true of most software companies. It's
Mhm.
hard to be able to check every single box and check it in a flexible way that solves for every single use case. So I think for the buyers, it's super important to prioritize what you're really trying to solve. And if you could only solve this top 3 to 5, what does that get you? And is that really good? And is that good
Mhm.
enough?
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't have too much to add because I really just completely agree. I think it all comes down to, you know, in some ways doing some of the job that the salespeople are going to be trying to do, just even before you engage to figure out, what is my budget? Do I have the authority? If not, do I need to pull in other groups within my company? What are our actual needs? What's
Mhm.
the timing? Are you looking to get this set up in a quarter or 2 years? Is it a 5-year digital transformation initiative? And then I think, it just comes down to really then starting to define kind of like you said, Robin, it's the Pareto principle. Like what's your 80-20 on this where you, like my fiance and I are looking at buying a house. So we've been, not as much now with COVID, but we were going around looking at some different houses, and the realtor's advice was basically like, you'll never find a perfect house.
Yep.
Right.
So you want to have kind of your big things. Hey, if it checks off 8 out of 10, that's probably your house, not completely, but it's like, otherwise, how will you really ever know? You have to at some point make the decision. So I think it's important to really just define what are things that are, on the gradient of like, I want to click a button and every single thing that I need to have happen happens, to there is no system. I have hundreds of employees doing everything by hand. Figure out your kind of medium, case in all of those, and then figure out what are, I love when we talk to a prospect who really knows, like, hey, my biggest problem is actually just, I'm worried I'm out of compliance. And it's like, great, you know your problem. That's different than like, I'm looking for a 25% increase in efficiency because I need to reduce headcount, or I want to add more headcount, and I want to, take some money away from, a consulting budget. Maybe can I bring this in house? I want to get better analytics. It's coming from the C-suite. They want better analytics into it. You might look at a different tool if you're looking purely for analytics compared to, I would imagine for ANVL. Have you had some reportables? Maybe you want something where you get in front of those before you have more reportables. That's going to be a very different need than, I'm really just interested in like streamlining my, general, analysis end of year, put some great dashboards together for, a deck or something. So yeah, I would say that's a long-winded way of saying basically like, know what your big priorities are, know what your nice to haves are. And then I would say like, ask good questions of salespeople, and probably the most important thing, Brandon, this is more specific, I think, to environmental, and we've touched on it a lot, but I would explicitly ask people, how long does it take to implement, and really listen to their answers. We've talked to lots of customers who have spent more than a year in implementation on tools that they are not very happy that they have after that year. So I think that's always a worthwhile question to go through. Just actually try to figure out for yourself, what is the time to value for the vendor that you're thinking about bringing on, making a commit to.
You made me think of one more thing that I would add, and I would bet this is probably important to us both. And that is when you think about a buying decision, and I've applied this in my career whenever I was buying tools and technologies, you are investing in a relationship with a company as well. So understanding, the capabilities of that organization, speed at which they move, how they innovate, how they partner with you, that's super important. And I think we run into a number of companies who start enamored with kind of self-serve tools where they're going to go do it all themselves, which that can be great to get you to a certain point. But certainly in our realm for ANVL, there's a lot that needs to happen, and there's a lot that's changing. So having a partner that can help you get through that versus that yet another tool to learn and manage, that becomes really important. So I think you need to think about the investment in the relationship as well, and what will that give you in return?
Definitely.
Yeah, both of you have kind of throughout the different questions have mentioned these large legacy EMIS systems. So I want to ask you guys both directly, like, what are the advantages? Let's say I wanted something for environmental and I wanted something for safety. So I'm looking at Encamp and ANVL, or I'm looking at one of these large legacy systems. What are the advantages of both?
You want me to tell?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, I think again, it becomes very much, what you're trying to achieve and what your journey looks like. And, I've been in companies where we built large ERP, very large systems. It's hard to be everything to everybody, no matter how big your company is or how many people you have. Certainly there can be depth of functionality in particular areas that might be important to you. Chances are they're shallow in other areas, which is why we exist. There's just not a lot of options out there that truly tailor to a frontline worker.
Yep.
It's more top down, in really more of a driving compliance versus engaging someone to be compliant. So that's kind of the difference we see, I think, in our realm.
Hmm. Yeah, that's yeah. In some ways, it's kind of interesting because when you're buying a larger system, I think the primary draw, if you're really just thinking about it on like a fundamental level, it's fewer decisions. Once you've made your one big decision, then you theoretically have everything else that's kind of been decided in that decision. Um, which I think can be a big advantage. I think the biggest disadvantage is actually probably that same point that you have fewer places to make decisions. And if you are working with point solution vendors, they will give you a lot more kind of nuance and capabilities in those things that they're specialists in.
Yeah.
But then you do have to probably, maybe bring on more vendors, but maybe the average contract is a lot smaller and you get more of them. I do think one of the important things to think about is also, again, it goes back to, what you're really trying to do as an organization, because there are definitely companies that don't need a huge tool. It might actually give them a worse outcome than if they don't, because it's complicated. You might need to hire people specifically just to manage that tool, like serve no other function except managing that tool, be an administrator. So if you're not the right fit for them, they're probably a worse experience. Whereas I would say more of a point solution, frankly, you're going to get the white glove treatment more likely and more often, and they'll probably innovate a lot faster for you. I would say something that if you're outside of technology, it might be hard to understand about the difference between really large companies in the software space and then smaller companies is it is much harder to build onto a large, older system. So their speed of innovation is slowed just kind of inherently by old architecture, older cloud systems. You might not be getting continuous deploys, so you're not sure that you're actually on the newest version. Do you need to download it? Do you need to pay more to download the new version? And I think if you're not really used to thinking about like how software companies work, then it might be easy to actually underestimate the benefits you get from working with a point solution. But really, a point solution is, the benefit of they've decided what they don't do, and that's almost more important than deciding what they do, because it's you don't want to work with a vendor who's going through a death by 1,000 cuts. Like I do 1,000 things and I do them all very badly. You might want to work with a couple different vendors who do 1-2 things and they really think they are top of class in those things. I also think, for what it's worth, referrals are always a great way to understand more about. It's hard to necessarily get them, but if you're thinking about making a large purchase, talking to some other people who have used the solution can really help you get an idea of, peel back the marketing that the company's going to be working hard to make you see, and actually just talk to a person and say like, hey, did you like to use this? Did you actually like understand how to use it? Are they responsive to your emails? Just kind of trying to get some due diligence done.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Can I add just a couple of things?
Oh, yeah, please. Go ahead.
Things that you maybe think of. So when you think about, I think it's easier to sometimes, or view that it's an easy decision to look at a big solution and go, yep, I'm going to get everything now. And that can be true in some unique cases, but we talked about whether there's depth or not, or whether it's the best solution. There could be layers of customizations that now mean you can't be on the current version, and that you've got a one-off, or in some cases, kind of the old ERP model would be, we'll customize for you, and then you're forever on kind of your own version, and you're going to have to continue to pay, and it's a lot to move to standard software or to change over time. And so there's a lot of there's potentially a lot of sunk cost from day one, where you won't see the value without spending way more than you ever imagined. Flip side would be looking for kind of those point solutions that are flexible, integratable, move faster, more nimble, may not solve everything you need, aren't the easy button. You can't check the one box and say, I could do everything I ever imagined. But I think that is it's an alluring idea, is to be able to just say, I'm going to buy this one thing and they do everything, without without appropriate due diligence and without kind of a plan of what you're really trying to do. Because by the time you get to the point to implement, solution number 10 in this big suite, that may not be the most important thing for you anymore.
Yeah, true.
Definitely.
And then you got sunk costs. So those are some things I think just to kind of add on there.
Yeah, and Robin, you kind of got into it a little bit, but I mean, let's, one thing we hear, this all comes down to dollars and cents as well. It is, I wouldn't feel right without jumping on here and talking about it. If you want something that's done in a box, all in one, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and not all of our customers have that, budget.
Yeah.
It is, I guess, just a final thought, I think, because this is kind of a fascinating, link between Encamp and ANVL. I think it's, because we really think about end-to-end systems in this space where it's, you need to go from the government, you need to understand what the government wants you to do. You need to actually have your facility operations, manage your data collection, and then you need to actually comply with the regulations by getting it, finished off. The way we've really thought about this at Encamp is we're going to do that last mile delivery as our starting point. And I think it's fascinating that ANVL, you're thinking in a similar framework, but saying, the frontline worker is, the first, piece of data that when it's created, it's because a frontline person is actually there, creating it or putting it together, or tracking it in some ways. And I think those are two really rare and kind of generally missing components. I would say of also really large systems. They're primarily built for middle management, and you might miss kind of the boots on the ground on either like the final shipping of the work product or actually like, working the facility floor, working the actual processes that, middle management's writing, rules and documents and procedures about.
Yeah. And I think, no, that's exactly right. And I think our models are kind of flipped. As you said, we're kind of tip of the spear trying to collect the earliest data we possibly can. And, that's super important. And COVID has driven so much of this right now that people, maybe they weren't looking at digital solutions for frontline before, but they certainly are thinking about it now, or trying to figure out how in the world am I going to do this in an Excel spreadsheet or on paper. And it just really can't be done. It's time to think about digital, kind of all things digital, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to see how much traction, we kind of get from COVID as a result of that, just across every industry for kind of the last mile and for the tip of the spear.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that ties in kind of to our last question. I have to ask you about COVID. So COVID has provided so many challenges for so many organizations. So in your opinion, in the safety market, what are going to be those changes moving forward, if any?
Well, I mean, we're living them right now for sure.
Yeah.
Companies, some companies have shut down and are trying to figure out how to reopen in a safe way. Many companies have been, business kind of as usual, with changes where possible, with regard to making sure everybody has PPE, they understand the protocols. You don't come to work if you've been exposed or sick. How do you train and educate people? I mean, it's a lot on many companies. And then you have, sadly, the companies who had so much illness and so much, the bulk of the workforce was unavailable. They've had to shut down for large periods of time, or situations where raw materials weren't available, so they can't continue manufacturing. So they've had skeleton crews. So, it feels a bit like most companies are beyond kind of that initial crisis management of what do we do. Many companies have moved through it more smoothly, with more sophisticated processes and ways of dealing with that. And then I think some companies are still trying to figure out what do I do now? How do I train? And from our realm, it's how do I train that distributed workforce, a transient workforce that's going to turn over, my contractors, my vendors, who comes into my facility, in addition to my core workforce. So it will be, in my opinion, and we all kind of know this is permanent change, that companies have to deal with for business continuity. And then in some cases for workers to feel safe. when there are many workers who have lodged complaints and don't feel safe going in, and it could be they don't understand what the company's doing, haven't been trained, maybe they don't understand how you're screening, or how they're being kept safe. So huge amount of opportunity, but I believe we're forever changed, and I also believe that gives companies an added extra pump or ability to ride the wave of COVID for positive and good reasons, for digital transformation. It is. I believe it will unlock budgets. I think it is unlocking budgets for all kinds of tools and technology for social distancing and data collection and education, all those things. So, and I believe it's much needed change for the frontline worker who often has still been dealing with paper. So I think there could be lots of positives that come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Robin, thank you very, very much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation with you two on digital transformation. So if you guys have any questions for Robin or Luke or myself, you guys can contact us on LinkedIn. Also, you guys can leave a comment below. But other than that, it's been great talking to you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
How do we, real quick, how do we find more about ANVL, Robin, if people are interested?
It's ANVL.com. We've got lots of information out there. And then certainly feel free to contact me directly on LinkedIn for any direct questions.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
We might as well pitch ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, Robin.
Yeah, you can find us at encamp.com as well, or our LinkedIn.
Perfect.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
See ya.
Thank you so much, Robin. Awesome. Appreciate it. All right.